Welcome folks to the stunning Earlswood Lakes. Now, this place is right on my street. It's big, it's open water, it's wild fishing, and it's ran with fish. The Canal and River Trust have stocked thousands of F1s into this place. The fishing is nothing short of incredible when you're on the fish. Now, about a month or so ago, I visited this venue. I caught loads of fish, had a fantastic day's fishing, but I think we can improve on that day. I was fishing a method feeder that day, and I think we've got a tactic now up our sleeve that I'm going to show you guys today, where we're going to catch even more fish. I've got a peg just down the bank. I can't wait to get started. I'm going to show you how to catch more fish on the feeder. Before I run you through my setup, I just want to briefly touch on my last session, because I think that is vital to where we've come to today. I fished a method feeder, standard method feeder tactics, you know, my short hook length of 3 inches with a little tiny wowser on a bait spike. Classic method feeder tactics that you'd fish on venues up and down the country. And what was happening is I'd cast out, I'd sit there for 30 seconds, the tip would dance around like, you know, like no one's business before the rod would just shoot around with a fish on the end. Now, you've got to learn to read your quiver tip, because that tells you so much about what's going on whilst your feeder's in the water. That to me told me that that feeder was getting annihilated by F1s. Fish were around that feeder and they desperately wanted those 2mm pellets that I was ramming around that feeder. And my hook bait was probably getting kicked all over the place, and eventually one would pick it up, the tip would tow round. For me, that's just not efficient. I want that first fish to come up to that feeder, suck everything in, and I want to hook that first fish. So we've come down today to fish with one of my favourite tactics, and that is a pellet feeder. I think a pellet feeder offers you a really, really tight parcel of bait. You can see there that there's one entrance point for the fish, one exit point for the pellets, one entrance point for the fish. So if I put my pellets in that feeder and I get my pellets prepared correctly, when I cast that into the swim and I took my hook bait into that little pellet feeder there, once a fish comes in, he takes one mouthful from that pellet feeder and hopefully he's got my hook bait in his mouth. The last thing I want to do is chuck out, like we were doing in the last session, chuck out a feeder and the fish just getting a free meal and maybe picking up the hook bait. I want them to pick up the hook bait with those pellets. So the pellet feeder I'm using, it's a little 20 gram midi pellet feeder. This is actually called a wedge feeder because of its shape. I've got quite a nice way of attaching the main line to the hook length. I like to use a little link off of a link swivel. I cut the swivel off and I'm left with just a link. And for me, that's perfect because it just sits in that little recess at the base of the feeder. It comes out nice and easy, but when a fish picks up the bait, you can see there, it's sort of semi-fixed. So that means I can set the tip quite slack and I'm relying on the weight of the feeder to prick the fish before, obviously, I can pick up and strike into the fish. Now, the hook length. You guys know I love a short hook length, especially when I'm fishing for F1s. That's 2 inches. It's 0.16. You'll see in a little while that the bites here are ridiculously savage. So although I'd probably like to use 0.12 or 0.14 on another occasion for F1s, I think we need 0.16 because the bites are so savage. I've got a size 16 hook on, and we've just got a bait band on the hair there because I've told you those fish, when I came last time, they were mad on pellets. It makes sense to me to use a pellet as hook bait. Obviously those fish, they're picking up pellets, I want them to pick up my pellet. We're just going to slip a 6mm pellet in the bait band. I've got a few 4mm as well, just see if we could, just in case we need to sort of match the hatch. But I think a 6mm pellet in the bait band, super simple tactics. Now, let's get on to sort of the hardware side of it. Main line, it's £8. Last time I came here, there was a few snags. I want to make sure that I'm using a really robust line. So it's £8 main line. I've got a nice 4000 size reel, a really nice lightweight reel because I'm using a really nice super lightweight rod. We're fishing for F1s, we want something that's going to bend and be super responsive because I'm using an inline feeder. I'm not using an elasticated feeder. I need to absorb all the lunges of those F1s, especially around the net, and I need to make sure that I'm using a really nice soft rod so I'm not going to bounce the hook out of the fish's mouths. So I'm using a Free Spirit. This is an F1 special. It's a high S, which, you know, when we're talking about high S, it means super amazing quality. It's 9 foot in length. We're only chucking a short distance today, so a 9-foot rod's going to be ideal. It's going to make netting fish super easy as well. Like I say, this rod, it sort of like bends right through to the butt, but it doesn't lock out. It's not like you're playing the fish on nothing. You've still got a bit of muscle down at this butt end, but it's bending all the way through. It's absorbing all those lunges. And that, trust me, is going to just cut down fish losses massively. I've just put in the lightest tip that comes with the rod today. The beauty of these tips is they're hollow tips. So again, it makes casting a doddle. You can cast a little bit further. I know we're not talking about a casting tool. It's only a 9-foot rod, but it just makes casting a little bit nicer. Get less wrap rounds of the tip because the tip stays a little bit stiffer when you're actually casting the feeder, but it's super sensitive as well. So you'll see today, like I say, the bites are ridiculously savage. Well, they were last time anyway, but we should see all those little indications, and like before, it helps when you're reading your tip and just it gives you an idea of what's going on while your feeder's in the water. So that's the gear. I can't wait to chuck in. What I think I'll do is have a cast out, see if we can catch a couple of fish, then I'll run through the bait and all the little extra tips that hopefully we can give you throughout the day. Well, you know me, folks, I'm itching to get going, but firstly, I think I've got to run you through just how to load the pellet feeder up, because loading it is quite important to the tactic. So, hook bait wise, I've already mentioned, we've got our banded hard 6mm pellet on there in the band. Pellets wise, I'm going to talk to you about preparing these pellets as we go through the session, because once again, it's quite an important aspect of all your feeder fishing, really, getting the pellets prepared correctly. But these are nicely soaked up pellets, and what I'm just going to do is just sort of like pour my pellets into the pellet feeder. I'm not going to put any pressure on them, and all I'm going to do is just lightly just tap them into the feeder. You can see I'm not squeezing them in there, I'm just lightly tapping those pellets into that feeder. And then with my hook bait, I can place my hook bait in the feeder, so it sits inside the feeder there, just at the top, and then with a second layer of pellets, I can wedge everything in. And this second layer, I feel like I can put just that little bit of extra pressure on there. Obviously, we want to make sure that when we cast, it doesn't all fall out, so we can put that extra bit of pressure on. And that's because we've not squeezed that first layer in. That first layer is going to act as our sponge, and it's going to help push everything out and create that nice little parcel of bait. What we're looking to do is create a little tight area of bait that's fishing for us and all broken down sort of within 20 or 30 seconds of it hitting the lake bed. So I'm going to have a cast out. Before I started talking to you guys, I had a quick chuck around with a bomb just to get an idea of the bottom, because when we fished our last session, it was quite snaggy. There was a few, like, I don't know whether they were tree roots or bits of old reeds or whatever they were. It was quite snaggy. So just had a cast around with a bomb. Everything in this area seems fantastic, seems nice and smooth. So I've just used the measuring sticks and I've sticked up at 22 metres. I think that's a great starting point. We can go further if we need to, we can come shorter. I ended up fishing at 25 metres last time and felt I could come shorter. So I think 22 metres is a great place to start. So it's just lob this feeder out, nice short rod, 20 gram feeder, hits the line clip nicely. I always want it to sink on a tight line, so it sinks nice and slowly through the water and it rights itself and it lands the correct way up. And then, as always, I want to make sure that I take my time when I'm sinking the line. I don't want to move that feeder. In theory, it should be breaking down already, and I don't want to spread pellets all around the swim. So I want to keep that trap nicely intact. So I'm taking a long time to sink my line. Get my rod under the water. I mean, if I get a bite now, it'll almost pull the rod out of my hand. So I'll know that I'm not missing any bites by doing this, but I want to make super sure that everything's nicely sank beneath the surface. And what I'm going to do is just slacken off the tip slightly. So we've got just a slight bend in the tip. You can see it's quite a windy day today. There's going to be a lot of tow on this water, and I just want the tow to naturally take that tip round to its sort of like natural resting position. I don't want to tighten right up and have a quiver tip that's really locked round. I want to try and keep it as straight as possible. The thing that I forgot is setting the stopwatch, especially early on in a session. I think setting a stopwatch is really important. It gives you a feel for the day. You get an understanding of how long your trap's taking to sort of like be sprung really by a fish. I know that if I'm getting liners on that nice fine quiver tip, I'll be able to see them. I'll know that if I'm getting bites at a certain time, I can read the day and manipulate the day as it goes on. So that's the trap set. The one thing I will say that with a pellet feeder, because there's not a lot of exposed bait, it could take a while for us to actually attract some fish into the area. On another occasion, it might be worth fishing a method feeder to start with, and when you do get those line bites, then you switch to the pellet feeder for actually catching the fish. But I'm hoping anyway, based on our last session, I'm hoping there's going to be plenty of fish milling around anyway, and it shouldn't take us too long for us to start getting regular indications. But that's the theory. Let's see if it's put into practice. Oh, he wanted that. Every single bite last time when I was here was an absolute tow around, and a little shake of his head as he picks up the feeder, and all of a sudden we're attached to the first of our Earlswood Lakes F1s. As I said, it's not always the most instant of tactics of pellet feeders. Sometimes it takes a while for a bite, and we're probably waiting 3 minutes then. 3 minutes 30 for a bite, to be precise, on the stopwatch. And I'm hoping as the session goes on, bites are going to come a little bit sooner than that. Hopefully we're absolutely sacking by the end of the day. And just while I play this fish, I think it's important just to take a second and appreciate this nice soft rod and like little light reel combo. I mean, so much of my fishing is done at distance with really heavy distance kit, so it's beautiful to actually get out and fish with a super light bit of gear, nice and bendy. So we've got no problems when it comes to playing fish like this. And this is a classic Earlswood F1 in the fact that beautifully chunky. Listen, you cannot get any better than that. Look at that, nailed in the bottom lip, absolutely spot on. Doesn't get better than that, folks. But the fish itself, absolutely stunning. Let's see if I was going to see if he's got a better side, but I think they're both immaculate. Both sides of him. Let's turn him round. Turn him round, because he's got one scale missing on that side, so we'll turn him around this side just so we can get his best side. Look at that. He's got to be, I don't know, the camera never does these fish justice, but he's got to be getting on for £3 maybe. Beautiful fish. hopefully the first of many. I think what I'll do is I'll put him back. I'd like to get a move on now in the session, but I think it's important to talk through the bait and how we've prepared it for today's session. Bait time, ladies and gents, and for hook baits, we've already touched on it, but we've got our 6mm, our 6mm coppins, and our 4mm. We'll just put a few in a bait tub. We don't need loads today, obviously, just for hook baits. And you might notice, obviously, they're coppins pellets. They're slightly elongated, and also coppins pellets just generally they break down a little bit slower. So I know that when I'm fishing them in a band, they're going to be fishing for me. I'm not going to end up fishing with a little pile of mush in my bait band. I'm actually fishing with a pellet in the band rather than a Screttings pellet that might break down a little bit too quick. So that's my main hook bait for today, and that's, to be honest, what I envisage using for most of the day. I wouldn't go anywhere though without my little bag of different hook baits. I've got my Washters and Wowzers and all different colours in there, and that is probably going to stay on my side tray unzipped, because I think it's going to be these pellets that's going to catch me the fish. Now, feed wise, I'm going for a bit of a phase at the minute. I think bigger pellets, when there's plenty of fish around, are getting me more bites. I think they're catching me more fish. And these 3mm swim stims are a beautiful pellet at the minute. They're so spongy when you soak them up. They bounce away from each other, and it's all about that reveal once your feeder's in the water. It's all about them pellets melting off each other and revealing your hook bait, which I think catches you the fish. So, to prepare these pellets, I love these EVA cases. What I like to do is I pour my dry pellets in the EVA case and add some water to them. And I'm talking, I do this probably like 2 hours before I'm going to start the session at least, because I want all the water to soak through the pellets. And the amount of water that I add to the pellets, it can be a bit confusing, but I think a great starting point is for half a bag of pellets, you add half a pint of water. You're not looking to cover the pellets and totally saturate them. You're just looking to start them off and just give them a bit of a soaking through. So, add the pellets to the tub, add the water, zip it up, give it a really good shake, arrive to the venue, arrive to my peg, get all my gear set up, and when I unzip this EVA case, you'll have beautiful pellets that are all soaked through. They won't be totally ready for fishing though yet. Unless you've actually timed that water and got that water quantity perfect, they won't be ready for fishing. You'll need to just touch them up, add a little bit more water, and that's where my soak comes in. This F1 sweet, it smells beautiful. I mean, if it was safe to drink, I'd be drinking it. It's absolutely lovely, that is. And what I like to do is to get my pellets to the perfect consistency for fishing. I'll do that with the soak. So I know I'm not overdoing it with the pellet soak. I'm just adding just a really good glug, just to bring it around, just to get those pellets to the perfect consistency for putting either around a method feeder or, as in today's case, in a pellet feeder. So that's the bait. Let's go and see if we can catch a few more fish. What an absolute corking bite. It was almost like a big bream bite nodding round. And you can just tell with this really soft quiver tip, you can see everything, and you sort of react a little bit quicker as well. So we're not just seeing that single run of the fish. We're actually seeing the fish shake its head against the feeder. It's perfect, and it shows really why it's nice to use that soft quiver tip. Now this session, it's turning into a brilliant day. Now don't get me wrong, we're not catching fish quite as fast as I wanted to, because I wanted to be catching fish sort of like every 30 seconds. I wanted to be in and out all the time and absolutely slaying fish, almost like in preparation for a match maybe. But you can just tell that we've got things about right, because we're getting the odd indication, nothing like we got on that last session that we fished, but we're getting the odd indication that there's some fish in the area. Obviously some fish have found our feed, and I feel like I'm not getting many indications of fish actually round the feeder though, nosing the feeder like we had before. And every time the tip sort of rattles, it's a beautiful F1. It's a little bit paler than some of the fish we've caught today, but still a beautiful fish nonetheless. Once again, absolutely pristine condition. Look at that. What a stonking fish, absolutely immaculate. Just getting back. The only change we've made from our starting setup has been the hook bait. Now, because I feel that these fish are really tuned into those pellets that we're feeding, obviously those pellets that we're feeding, they're bigger than normal. They've probably swollen up to, like I say, 4 mil, something like that. So what I'm trying to do is just match the hatch. I felt like my 6 mil pellet, occasionally I feel like I'm just missing out on fish as the pellet's just slightly too big for the gape of hook I'm using. So because the fish are going for those feed pellets, I've scaled everything down, and I'm using a little 4 mil hard pellet in the band. And you can probably see there that in comparison to the 5 mil, sorry, the 6 mil pellet, it's a lot easier for the fish to actually get hold of the hook. The pellet isn't getting in the way of the hook. Whereas with the 6 mil pellet, it was quite a big pellet. I don't really want to be using a really big hook for these fish. I want to be using, you know, 16, maybe a 14 is my maximum, but I want to be using quite scaled down tackle. These fish have been caught now quite a few times. There's a lot of people visiting this venue. I want to make sure that I'm coming back with a fish each time, and just switching to a 4 mil pellet, still loading the feeder the same way. But you can see there, hopefully you can see there, that 4 mil pellet, you know, it's almost camouflage with the other loose feed. And with those fish becoming so preoccupied with that feed, it makes sense to give them what they want. So we're casting in the same spot again. We've not had to move. I feel that when you're fishing for a lot of fish on a big water, it's not a case of chasing them around the place. It's a case of being in the right area to start with, and then making the fish come to you and settle on your feed. And once the fish are there, it's just basically don't make a mistake. That's the idea. Just keep going in, trying to come back with a fish every chuck, and just going through the motions. I mean, we've got the bite time down to under 2 minutes now, I'd say, which is passable. You know, if we get a fish every 2 minutes, we're on for a massive weight. The fish are averaging probably 2.5 pounds, something like that. I'd say the average size of fish is. So a fish every couple of minutes. Like I say, we're on for a big old weight at the end of the day. Some of the bites have been ridiculous as well. Some of the bites have been little nods and we've been able to pick up straight away, but sometimes it's almost as if they take a run up, pick up the bait as they're on the run and bolt off. But obviously that's not the case, but it just seems like that. They're so fast, some of these fish are on. That initial run is like you're on the limit. You're holding the rod out there, you're hoping that the fish isn't going to crack you off. It's one of the reasons we're using slightly more robust main line, that 8 pound main line, and slightly more robust hook length material. I mean, obviously whenever you're fishing for any style of fishing, that suppleness in your hook length, that light hook length is always going to get you more fish. It's always going to get you more bites. But there's no point using that really light hook length if you're just going to get cracked off on the bite 9 times out of 10. So it's always that balancing act. We're only using a short hook length as well, so when you go really short on the hook length, once again, there's not as much stretch in there. It's just less. There's just more chance, of it breaking on the take. Remember, we're not using an elasticated feeder. I do like the the sort of like the compact nature of a little inline feeder. I think it's really subtle, really nice. Sits there on the bottom as a, I mean, I keep using the word a trap, but it's the perfect trap. Sits there perfectly waiting for a fish to come along and spring our little trap. So the way I'm putting those pellets in, I'm guessing that everything has been broken down now for at least 30 or 40 seconds, and any time now, hopefully, if the last few casts have been anything to go by, the tip should tow round with another fish on the end. There's been a couple of stocking processes here. So the original stocking has been those nice big golden F1s that you know, try and pull your arm off when you do get a bite. But there's been a recent stocking of smaller F1s, sort of, I don't know, you'd probably say 10 ounces, and they're the ones I think that are giving you those little rattly bites. They're welcome fish, don't get me wrong, we've had a couple of them today, but I think we want those bigger fish, and they're the ones that I'm after, if I'm honest. Now, because we're using that stopwatch, and this is where the stopwatch comes into play, all of my bites, if I'm going to get a fish, all of the bites have come within 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. You know, we've had a really good couple of runs where we've been getting bites in under 2 minutes. But because I know I'm getting those bites in 3.5 minutes, it's pointless me leaving the feeder in for 7 or 8 minutes. I know that everything's probably, you know, disappeared, all my pellets have been eaten. There we go. Look at that, just as we're talking about reeling in. Like I say, most of our bites have been sort of like in that 3.5 minute window, but we had that beautiful run earlier on where we were getting bites in like under 2 minutes. It was brilliant. This feels like a nice plodder. Again, wasn't a tow round. You might have noticed that I've struck into that fish. I do like to strike into my fish. I think it helps just set the hook home, and especially when you get a drop back, I think you've got to be on it pretty fast. Otherwise, it's going to shake the hook against the feeder, and probably get rid of the hook quite quick. So as soon as I see that little flicker on the tip, any sharp movement, I like to think I'm on it in a flash. Maybe my reactions aren't as good as some, but I like to think I'm on it pretty quickly. Again, nice soft rod doing its job. Felt a couple of snags on the way back in a few times, but we've not lost any fish through the snags yet. And hopefully you can see. Oh, he's a beauty. He is a beauty. Oh, we've missed him. That is just a shocking bit of netting. Absolutely shocking. I thought he was a bigger fish because he just seemed to nod around. Let's see if we can get him up. Come on. I'm not going to miss you that time. What a beautiful fish. I mean, look at him, he's got, oh, look at that for an F1. That is a fantastic fish. I mean, I can't tell you, you know, I'm trying to get across how good a condition these fish are, how beautiful it is to catch nice conditioned fish. And that, as far as F1s go, that is a stunning fish. So I think we've got the approach of just about spot on. Next time I'll visit this sort of venue, I think I'll be setting up a pellet feeder. That's without question. What beautiful fish to end on. Fantastic.